Natalie, with an anxious pulse in her heart, crossed the threshold of her first corporate integration meeting. She had entered the walls of this corporation almost 3 years ago, but until now, she had never attended such an event due to her fiancé's firm opposition. She had no intention of arguing with her fiancé. Natalie was deeply in love with him. Every thought that her presence at such gatherings could lead to conflicts or even trigger jealousy in her beloved was unbearable to her. However, as it often happens in many relationships, something happened that turned her world upside down. Natalie discovered that her beloved, the man to whom she gave her heart, was cheating on her without any scruples. And not just with anyone, but with one of her colleagues from work, despite being engaged. This discovery shook Natalie like a violent earthquake, shattering the foundations of her trust. Since then, like a petrified tree, she closed herself off from others, appearing unshakable even to the subtlest emotions. In her somber world, the only glimmer of light was Dominique, the secretary with whom she shared an office. Dominique, mature and understanding, though 2 decades older, was like a second mother to Natalie. She rarely got to see her own daughter, who had settled in America after completing her studies, so the warmth she showed Natalie was invaluable. It was Dominique who introduced Natalie to the intricacies of corporate work when she embarked on her adventure with the company. The enterprise where they both worked dealt with finances and was owned by a pair of siblings, Annabelle and Aidan. Always elegant and professional, they formed the driving force behind this machine and were demanding but polite employers. Finally, Dominique convinced Natalie that it was time to forget about her fiancé and return to a normal life. Norman, nor any other worries, held any significance anymore. It was time for Natalie to open up to people, to conversations, to joy. Dominique promised they would have a great time together. Natalie decided to go to the party. Before that, due to Norman, she rarely left her house, and certainly not to go to clubs, so she initially felt awkward. But everyone was so friendly and open that Natalie began to relax and realized that this evening could bring her a little relief and joy, which she desperately needed. A wind of unexpected change swept through the corporate integration meeting when Aidan unexpectedly appeared, bringing an air of unmatched surprise. Annabelle, as if sensing something that was about to happen, gracefully bid farewell, sowing disbelief in the hearts of her employees. Unchanging gazes directed at Aidan as he entered the room expressed surprise. Dominique, with the eye of an experienced secretary, was the first to notice that something was off. Aidan, known in the company as the perfect man, showed a different side this time. His always perfectly tailored suit, whispering that it was a symbol of a successful man, was replaced by casual sportswear. His hair, usually neatly arranged, now danced freely. Dominique, surprised by this sight, began to ask herself questions that had no answers. Aidan disappeared immediately into the crowd of employees who were celebrating the company's success. Their joy was not disturbed by Aidan's presence. He was just another employee to them, allowing them to fully enjoy the bliss of the moment. Throughout this time, Natalie, under the influence of fresh memories and the pain of betrayal, decided to take the final step towards a new life. The entire night was to be a manifestation of her freedom from sadness, a manifestation of her desire for joy. Aidan, until now, only saw Natalie in her professional attire, but that night he saw her in an entirely new light. Her little black dress perfectly accentuated her feminine curves, and her loose hair danced to the rhythm of the music until they started dancing together. Aidan, stunned, realized that Natalie was not just an intelligent and sensitive woman, but also an incredibly beautiful and charming person. Aidan, though stunned, could not allow himself to lose his senses. Still, he drove Natalie home, taking care of her safety. As she fell asleep in his car due to the alcohol she had consumed, he reassured her that she was safe. Everything changed when Natalie touched his hand and invited him for a glass of wine. Aidan, though surprised, did not refuse. In her apartment, which had a similar minimalism to his, he felt at home. Natalie handed him a glass, but unexpectedly, it slipped from her hand, spilling red wine on his white shirt. Aidan looked at her, surprised but smiling, aware that the night was just beginning. In the moment when the wine stained Aidan's shirt, the atmosphere in Natalie's living room became tense. Natalie, in her nervous haste, tried to remove the stain, but realizing the futility of her actions, she decided that she needed to soak the fabric as quickly as possible. She directed a determined, apologetic look at Aidan. "You need to take it off, Aidan," she said, pointing at his shirt. Without hesitation, she helped him pull the cotton fabric from under his pants, and this unexpected contact with his body sent shivers down her spine. Aidan was undeniably athletic, his muscles accentuated by a golden tan. As she looked at him, Natalie's legs betrayed her, and a desire ignited in her heart that she couldn't suppress. They were so close now that she could feel the warmth of his body, and her heart was pounding like a bell. Without thinking, she felt her lips land on his, and Aidan gracefully reciprocated her kiss. Natalie's soft whispering, confessing her desire in the here and now, led to Aidan carrying her to the bedroom, where they spent a passionate night together. In the early morning, Aidan woke up first, as was his habit. Lying next to the sleeping Natalie, he stared at her, admiring her beauty. Suddenly, incomprehensible words began to escape her lips. It sounded like a male name. Was it Steve? Sebastian? Sylvester? Surprised, he felt Natalie's hand gently touch his arm. It was the final straw that broke the camel's back. It wounded his pride, causing pain he couldn't hide. Without a moment of hesitation, he dressed and left Natalie's apartment, not waiting for her to wake up. Although anger still burned within him, he decided not to let anyone at work notice how hurt he was. He treated Natalie with the same professionalism as always, secretly observing her to see how she would react to his absence that morning. Natalie woke up that morning in a haze of forgetfulness. She couldn't recall a single scene from the integration night. Everything was shrouded in complete darkness. Dominique, her close friend, said she saw Natalie dancing with Aidan around midnight and promising to stay until 3, and then order a taxi. But since that didn't happen, Natalie could only guess what happened next. An early evening phone call from Dominique brought a little more clarity. In the end, all Dominique knew was that Natalie left with Aidan, and then there was silence. It was a frustrating unknown. Natalie admitted to herself that she might have had too much to drink. But now there was nothing she could do but observe Aidan the next day. During work, Aidan seemed untouched at first glance, maintaining his professional demeanor. But Natalie felt that something hung in the air, an intangible, invisible tension. When Aidan finished his shift, Natalie stopped him, almost whispering that her memory of the evening was too foggy, but she wanted to thank him for taking her home. Aidan's reaction was like a blow. He looked shocked, almost hurt, that Natalie didn't remember that night. How was it possible that she didn't have any recollection? His farewell was cold, almost mechanical. Natalie felt a blush of embarrassed shame spread across her face. Talking with Dominique, Natalie feared that she might have done something to cause this distant coldness in Aidan. But Dominique comforted her, saying that she probably said something wrong, as Natalie couldn't recall anything else. Natalie was sad. Aidan was handsome, and their previous conversations had been enjoyable. Maybe they could be friends? But now, after ending her relationship with Norman, Natalie didn't want to immerse herself in melancholy. She decided to live like a woman her age, spontaneously, finding joy in life, meeting new people, traveling. On the next weekend, she decided to go to a club with her new co-workers. There she met Philip, who gracefully stepped into her life, starting a playful flirtation. Although Philip had his charm, Natalie wasn't enchanted by him. She gave him a chance, meeting him a few times, until their acquaintance reached a new level. But after a night that promised romantic excitement, Natalie felt an unexpected emptiness. Instead of joyful butterflies in her stomach, instead of a racing heart, there was nothing. She decided that further meetings with Philip didn't make sense, and the convergence of feelings confirmed that Philip didn't reach out after that night either. One morning, while Natalie was preparing morning coffee for Aidan, she unexpectedly fainted, and the hot drink spilled on Aidan's snow-white shirt. However, now the shirt was his smallest concern. He had to take care of Natalie. When she regained consciousness, feeling embarrassed, she tried to clean the stain from Aidan's shirt. Smiling warmly, he said he wouldn't let her cause any more damage to his clothes. This piqued Natalie's curiosity, and she began to inquire. Aidan confessed that on that night when he drove her home, she insisted on sharing a glass of wine, some of which she ended up spilling on his shirt. Natalie blushed with shame, realizing how drunk she must have been not to remember anything. Indeed, Natalie was surprised to find a broken glass in her trash can, but she thought she must have broken it herself, replacing it with another one. After this interlude, the atmosphere between them became somewhat lighter. Aidan suggested giving her the next day off, encouraging her to get blood tests done because losing consciousness without reason wasn't normal. But for the moment, she needed to gather herself so he could drive her home. Natalie tried to protest against Aidan's help, mentioning the never-ending workload, contracts, and a pile of duties. However, Aidan was adamant and firm. When he made a decision, there was no room for compromises. He drove her home and, upon entering, checked the contents of her fridge. As he suspected, it was empty, and Natalie used to eat out. He instructed her to lie down on the couch and not move while he headed to a nearby store to buy essential groceries. Upon his return, he quickly prepared some sandwiches for her, to which Natalie asked for coffee, even though she was the one who usually made him the beverage. Aidan fulfilled her request, but when Natalie tried to pick up the cup, it unexpectedly slipped from her hand. A moment later, it disappeared into the bathroom. Aidan felt concerned, thinking she might have burned herself, but Natalie quickly explained that she just wanted to change her blouse to avoid getting burned by the hot coffee. In the face of these events, Aidan decided to replace the coffee with juice, as it seemed to bring nothing but bad luck today. He made sure Natalie had everything she needed, and she had to go for tests the next day. After saying that, he left, leaving her alone. Natalie, however, wasn't at peace. It wasn't that she spilled the coffee because of its taste, but rather, the aroma of the drink triggered sudden nausea in her. She knew something was wrong when she smelled it, forcing her to rush to the bathroom, where she vomited. This situation threw her into a state of panic. She felt unwell, and fear consumed her. She immediately called Dominique. Dominique didn't hesitate for long. Being a mother and having an additional 20 years of experience, she asked if it was possible that Natalie was pregnant. Upon hearing those words, Natalie became even more terrified. Dominique promised that right after work, she would come to her and bring pregnancy tests to check together. In the morning, Natalie should go for the tests to confirm it. Unfortunately, Natalie realized that her period was late, which overwhelmed her even more. When Dominique showed up after work, she didn't have 1 or 2 tests with her, she brought a whole bag of them. That was typical of her friend, who always preferred to be 100% sure rather than relying on just one test. Without much expectation, Natalie proceeded to take the tests. Each of them showed faintly visible 2 lines. Natalie hoped that it might be just a temporary crisis, but Dominique enthusiastically announced that regardless of whether the line is light or dark, if it appears, it means she is pregnant. Both women agreed that only a blood test would give 100% certainty, and since Natalie had a day off the next day, she could visit the gynecologist. The test results would require waiting for a day, and seeing how stressed and panicked Natalie was, they both understood that there was no point in waiting. They booked an online appointment, and Dominique suggested that she could visit her during the lunch break to support her with her presence. Natalie was immensely grateful to her. She could always rely on Dominique, even in such a difficult moment. Natalie spent a sleepless night, and the next day she went for the tests. She met Dominique there, and they both went to the doctor's office together. The doctor dispelled all doubts. She was definitely pregnant. Natalie was terrified. When they came out, she was overwhelmed with great despair, but Dominique called a taxi as she had to return to work. She promised to visit Natalie after work. In the afternoon, Dominique found Natalie in a dramatic emotional state. She claimed that it was the greatest tragedy of her life. She was pregnant with a man she knew she didn't want to be with. Even after their one meeting, she felt no satisfaction, and he didn't either, since he never called or texted. What should she do now? The only thing left for her was to terminate the pregnancy before it's too late. Dominique advised her to calm down first before making such a drastic decision. She needed to think it through carefully, as that decision would stay with her for her whole life, and whether she could live with such a burden. Dominique confessed that she, herself, wouldn't be able to make such a decision. If she didn't feel a connection with the child, she would consider adoption. But she would never choose to terminate an innocent life. Dominique told Natalie to lie down and think, and suggested that she should contact Philip, who had the right to know about the child. Natalie acknowledged that Dominique was right and that before making any decisions, she should talk to Philip. Reluctantly, she searched for his number and mustered the courage to call him. He didn't answer. So, she sent him a text message saying they should meet because she was pregnant. Shortly after, Philip called back, but only to ask how she could be sure that it was his child. He stated that he didn't intend to get involved in the responsibility of a child, especially since they had spent only one tragic night together, which he would rather forget. Philip insinuated that, as a gentleman, he was willing to provide her with financial support to get rid of this problem. Natalie, angry and frustrated, disconnected abruptly and burst into tears. Then the phone rang again. Natalie thought it was Philip, wanting to add something to his proposal, so, annoyed, she answered and started yelling, expressing her opinion about him. But when she heard another voice, Aidan said he was calling to inquire about the test results. Natalie was distraught, embarrassed, and emotionally moved. She told him she didn't need the results because she already knew she was pregnant with a man who flatly claimed it wasn't his child, but was willing to help her get rid of the problem. Aidan froze and immediately stated that he had to come to her and do it as soon as possible. Natalie tried to dissuade him from the idea, but Aidan was already in his car, driving to her as fast as he could. He entered Natalie's home and declared that he needed to see the doctor's results and wouldn't accept any refusal. Natalie stood motionless, in shock, going through a real breakdown and despair, while her boss behaved as if he had lost his mind. Moreover, he complained that she didn't show him her private medical report. But Aidan was Aidan, and once he decided something, there was no turning back. Aidan looked at her, his hands began to shake, and then he embraced Natalie, assuring her that everything would be fine, that everything would work out, and they needed to talk seriously now. Aidan went back to the integration night, which didn't end when he drove her home and broke the wine glass. They had an intimate moment that was an extraordinary experience for him, lasting until dawn. He shared that in the morning when she was asleep, she mentioned some man with an S, which deeply hurt him. He loved her, but knowing she was thinking about someone else made him feel humiliated. He decided to walk away and forget about her. Her complete lack of memory of that night irritated him even more. Later, he heard gossip in the corridor that she was dating some Philip. When he learned about her pregnancy, he thought it might be his child. He wanted confirmation from the doctor to check which week of pregnancy she was in, and it turned out to align perfectly. Aidan knew without a doubt that the child had to be his. Without hesitation, he told her that she had always been in his heart, that that night was something extraordinary for him, like a spark turning into a fiery flame. He wasn't afraid to tell her that he loved her, and with a heartfelt request, asked her to give them a chance, as he wanted to be with her and their child. Natalie, shocked, felt fury rising within her. How could he not tell her anything? How could he treat her as if nothing happened? However, Aidan hugged her tightly, kissed her, and she reciprocated, albeit with initial resistance. Then, gently pushing him away, she firmly said that she didn't mention any man but had mentioned the name Stefan during her sleep. It was the name of her beloved dog that she had to put to sleep a few days earlier due to advanced cancer. It was the only decision she could make, and she was devastated by it. She didn't remember anything from that night, perhaps due to the large amount of alcohol consumed, but Aidan could have told her everything. Aidan realized that he couldn't turn back time. He loved her and wanted to be with her. Though just a few minutes ago, Natalie was immersed in black despair, now, as if in a fraction of a second, everything changed, and she became the happiest woman in the world. Aidan approached Natalie, gently kissing her, caressing her body, and she trembled with emotion. They surrendered to a passionate wave of desire, and Natalie wanted this moment to last forever. They indulged in each other, forgetting everything else but themselves. Their bodies intertwined in a hot dance, and a spark of love ignited between them. Both desired an even deeper connection that went beyond words and gestures. In that moment of passion, they became one, immersed in love that transcended the boundaries of time and space. Just a few moments ago, Natalie's world collapsed around her, and now she was the happiest woman on earth. She had a wonderful man by her side, and in the near future, they were going to become parents.